Hello again, everybody. We're back on that Friday thing happening today, and we thought we'd pick up where we left off a little bit, maybe yesterday, about the billionaire survival thing, and also loneliness.
Well, I think if you're planning on sequestering yourself in some sort of bubble, you pretty much have to figure out that that's going to get lonely or very boring, one or the other. So all of these schemes to move to Mars or set up shop on the moon after the Earth becomes inhospitable because of a lot of factors, some of them natural processes, I'm sure, but some of them made worse by our indiscriminate use of natural resource. So we have to kind of factor that all of that together. You know, when you look at causes for things that are problematic, usually you have to factor in, number one, your own contribution to whatever that problem is, and B, that there's a lot of other factors that are kind of adding to the big problem that you're facing. And so I'm getting the feeling like a lot of these billionaires and their escape plans aren't taking into consideration the effect that they themselves are having on things. And so that does not bode well for the new plantation or the new pioneer outpost if you haven't reckoned with the things that you yourself have done, your companies have done. I mean, let's think about it. Every time Elon Musk's company shoots a rocket off, there's a lot of residual poisons left in the air. There's got to be. There's junk, there's dirt, there's all kinds of things that those communities that live around there have to deal with. Or maybe they're ignoring it, which makes it even more likely that they're going to find out that there's an awful lot of problems from that. And every time one of those goes wrong, if they go right, I think probably there's less residual problems. But if it goes wrong, and I know the last 3 shots haven't turned out as well as he had hoped.
Yeah.
And so if we're seeing that on Earth here where we know what's going on, imagine yourself on Mars.
Well, that's the freaky part. Great segue, by the way.
Oh, thanks.
A lot of sometimes classic and sometimes way not classic sci-fi movies.
Oh, I know.
You know, like that theme. You know, it's very cool to be out there exploring space and all that. And everybody knows that involves great amounts of time away from the friendly sphere of the Earth.
Well, that's why you need the holodeck and things like that.
Exactly. And they're probably working on that, aren't they? But what kinds of things, if they colonize Mars, in terms of being under a huge bubble, which is the only way you can do it, you know, you would imagine, they'd probably have some sort of a holodeck-ish kind of thing in a regular cinema, maybe a little cafe.
Yeah, but what's going to play at the cinema? Are you going to play old Earth movies? Because for me, if I was watching old Earth movies, I would become so much more nostalgic for home. I can tell you. I mean, I'm in a beautiful place right now. I'm here voluntarily. I can leave when I want, within reason. And last weekend, it was a holiday weekend back home, and I got some pictures of my family doing their thing, enjoying themselves, having a barbecue here and there, going on a local adventure. And I felt deeply nostalgic. It rather surprised me how hard that hit my sensibilities.
Yeah, well, that's part of the thought experiment today. Maybe just think about how
would
you feel? And maybe it's very, very nice and impressive, and for the first maybe year or something, it'd be great, But after a while, you realize how fragile a bubble that you're in, because you've got any little thing that happens to go wrong. And you have to have that in the back of your head all the time.
Well, I can tell you that when our water system, we've talked about it lots of times before, so I'm just going to say it again. The construction of a highway, expanding a highway from 2 lanes to 4, all the equipment, the packing equipment, the ones that pound the ground and that, had the effect of destroying our shallow well. And we were a long time without being able to draw fresh water. And that impacted my daily life in such a huge way because, one, we were spending money buying water. We were buying like water cooler water for our freshwater needs. And we were collecting a lot of rainwater, and that had to be decanted into things that we could bring inside to use for the bathroom purposes. And that all takes time. At one point, we didn't have very much fresh water cooler water, and I'm talking about those big 5-gallon things or whatever they're 8. You said they're 8. They're 8 gallons or whatever they are. Those huge things that they're bottles that they tip upside down. They have a spigot on them, and so we were using those. But
to flush the toilet, which is a terrible waste of money.
At the beginning, we didn't have the rainwater, and so we had no choice but to do that. And that was, it just got you in the gut every time that you flush one of those down.
Money literally going down the toilet.
It's going down the toilet. But my point here is, think how simple that is. I mean, it's a simple need. We all take it for granted. At least Western countries take it for granted. And when you're faced with having to actually think about that and provide for those needs, it is not at all simple. And it's not a gimme. And it requires so much forethought, planning, actual time. I began to feel kind of like the me time that I had just disappeared when that problem came forefront, because you had to plan how you're going to take a shower. Eventually, we bought 2 black rolling garbage cans, big plastic ones. They were easy to get. Again, we don't have a car. And so we got those at a nearby store, dragged them home, and then we were using those and praying for rain. And those would fill up, and we'd leave them in the sun so that the water would heat up. And it got so we bought one of those camping shower changing cabanas, and we were using that to be able to take a shower with a camping shower bag, or Dave devised a pump system that we could drop right down in that bucket, in that big garbage can thing, and you could get a hot shower depending on if the weather was real warm. If it wasn't all that warm, then you either had to bring it indoors and take a shower in the normal tub enclosure.
Yeah. But, however, we're supposed to be in the bubble on Mars in our mind at the moment.
Water is going to be an issue.
It will. And
somebody's got to deal with that. You've got to deal with that.
Right.
Especially if you're in the pioneering group.
I mean, in theory, actually, some of these things would be possible because Mars is not without an atmosphere completely. Certainly it's not breathable. But there is, it's mainly carbon dioxide. So there is oxygen there, right? If you get the carbon off of there, you've got some oxygen. So they're going to have machines that separate the oxygen out of the carbon. There's going to be the water problem, certainly. And there is some water vapor in the Martian atmosphere, as I understand. But, the level of it is going to be pretty low. So you'd have to be collecting this somehow over a very broad area.
Well, also, you're going to be living on the ship you showed up in for a long time, because it's going to take time to develop some sort of exterior bubble so you can stretch your legs. And I know we've all talked about what a great blessing it is to be able to get on an airplane and fly across the sea in 8 hours.
All the gyms in there, too, I'm sure. Go out to the workout room and all that.
Well, think about, like, the space station. I mean, I really admire those people that are there, because for me, the claustrophobia, that would be really difficult. And, you don't always feel like real sociable. I mean, there's periods of time where I don't want to talk to anybody. I'm not mad. There's been no altercation of any kind. You just want a little solitude and a little quiet. Maybe read your book or write or work on some little handicraft
So if
project.
you were in the bubble at Mars, would you, how much of this underwriting tension would be there from knowing that any system that went awry any second of the time?
Oh.
The other thing you'd have to have would be some sort of asteroid alert system, and being that the fact that the atmosphere is not thick enough to really deflect much of that you got to watch out for asteroid hits all the time.
Yeah.
And alarms going off at any minute, any time of the day or night.
I have a real fundamental problem believing that taking on all of that obligation and responsibility for setting yourself up from scratch on a different planet would be somehow preferable to doing what it takes to make things better on the planet that you know. I truly have a big problem with that. And my fear is, with all of that, is has everything that needs to be studied about this place been studied? And is this more about control? Here everybody's, there's so many countries and systems of government are in place, and there's conventions and there's protocols and habits that we all understand. We have a worldwide system where you go through customs checkpoints and, there's an understanding, or has been, that's pretty reliable about what is required to pass from one place to another. And there are watchdog groups who make sure that business enterprises are not terribly in-your-face exploitive. And I believe that some of the ones that are at the top, they've been called on the carpet increasingly about what governments are now thinking are business practices that are taking advantage of the consumer, that are not fully explained in a way that the consumer can get around those definitions that people put down, so that it works for them and not just as a profit generating.
I would have to think
endeavor.
that's a good part of the motivation, actually, to take that risk to live like that. Because instantly there's no superior government, and it's just one leader or so.
Yeah.
So whatever they want to call themselves. But all of those
old movies, don't you remember? Most of those old movies, whoever's in charge goes kind of crazy. They way become. I don't want to use the word corrupt because it's more than that. It's like absolute power does corrupt absolutely, and they become so inflated with their sensibility that they should be in control and have, ultimate say over everything. Now, I can see if you lead a party, think going through the Donner Pass in the United States or trekking across the Great Plains. There has to be one person that pretty much you have to rely on to say, okay, this is an acceptable risk, what we're about to do for this stretch, or it's not. We're going to go around whatever impediment it is, or we're going to wait, or we've got to go now. Controlling the timing and trying to figure out what is the best chance for survival. And usually that comes down to a single person, maybe two people who are pretty well informed and pretty experienced in the kinds of hardships that you would face in a pioneering situation. And I would think that kind of pioneering would be so much more demanding and so much more unpredictable than even traversing, uncharted territories on planet Earth. Because at least you have some understanding or a basic expectation of having air to breathe, let's say, or you're going to come across some water at some point. And when you trek across the desert now on Earth, any desert on Earth, the kinds of supplies that you should have, must have with you. I mean, you see these movies where there's some poor soul who's, just dehydrating. They're turning into a raisin trekking across the desert. And I think that's probably very akin to the kinds of stressors that you would feel if you were pioneering Mars or the moon. I'd rather take the moon than Mars any day, because at least you can look out and maybe see your old home. That would be a certain comfort to me. But I don't like the sounds of either one of them. And I think it's just about planting a flag. Planting a flag and say, hey, any development that happens here in the future, when maybe we're better equipped and have other ways of travel to transport stuff, that I get a cut. I'm the founder of this. I need to plant my flag. That's how it feels to me, because it makes very little sense at this time otherwise. And those unmanned space vehicles, oh my gosh, I love seeing the images that they send back. But even those, every now and then, there's one that fails for whatever reason. Something happened, it fell over and can't right itself, or, just really problems and hazards that are not dramatic. They're just stuff that can happen, like knocking over your water bottle or, some other thing that's not all of that crazy to think about, but it creates a lot of havoc. So, I don't know.
Yeah. It's speaking of old sci-fi movies, I don't know the name of this movie. I've seen it pop on here and there, and it sort of covered this scenario pretty well. It was a good production. Anyway, the astronaut or whoever was on a long-term mission, and they had apparently solved the problem of renewable, oxygen and energy and all that stuff. So it wasn't so much a case that they were running out of oxygen in their tanks or anything like that. But he'd been up there a while and was getting very lonely, and he kept, checking in by radio to get updates and all that thing. Anyway, the movie goes on, and he gets some of the appointments that they make to speak on the radio are missed, or they're late, and it becomes a little bit less reliable. And the voice on the other end from the Earth is sounding more and more tense, and it comes to find out that everything is falling apart on Earth. There's impending wars, there's still battling the pollution problem, and he, the astronaut was saying, yeah, well, everything looks pretty stable here. It does look like it's, it could sustain life and all that. But even so, I'm lonely. I want to come home. When are you going to send up the transport? And they said, well, we've run into some problems. That's behind the schedule. A lot of resources have been taken away from that because we're gearing up.
Or how about funding cuts?
We're gearing up for war, and it looks like more and more like we can't avoid this. And so he's thinking, oh, that doesn't sound good. But anyway, so another couple of appointments on the radio were missed, and this guy, when he finally gets home, the guy sounds more and more panicky when he comes back, and he says, I don't know how much longer I'm going to be able to talk to you. He says, well, what does that mean about the transport? He said, I can't tell you when that could be, and frankly, maybe never. And you can just see, and the camera angles and the lighting were all really appropriate for his reaction to that. And then I think it was sort of close, if not the very last message. The guy on Earth says, let me tell you something. You don't want to come back here.
Wow.
And that's sort of, where the story ends, but, you kind of wonder what happens to him. But again, he's not worried about running out of anything.
Is he alone?
He's alone, on the mission. But of course, I think it ends something like, it's sort of predictable, but it ends something like, for some odd reason, there's some other person on this planet, happens to be a good-looking female.
Of course, all those sci-fi.
So I don't know about the ending so much, but the rest of the movie was, quite. You could feel,
that tension,
the whole tension in it, and the perspective and all that. That's kind of what we're trying to talk about today, to put your own mind in that sort of scenario.
Well, even these scenarios of ultra-rich people devising bunkers, terrestrial bunkers for themselves.
Yeah, that's the thing. It's just really, I think it's a pre-experiment to trying to look at colonizing Mars or the moon or something.
Well,
but the thing of it is, those experiments have been done. The geodomes or the biospheres or whatever. There was one, I know, we have some friends who live in Scotland, and they did one there, and they were also going to, film it for entertainment. Mm-hmm. But it was run like it was a real survival situation, and you couldn't get any help from outside the biosphere, and you had to have sustainable systems going. And to my knowledge, none of these experiments have worked out.
Long term, you mean?
But you did have the backup of being able to come out of the biosphere and be okay.
Yeah.
So at least psychologically, you couldn't really experiment with that aspect of it, because they knew that, they knew that some small little thing that goes wrong that would really pretty much bring the experiment to a close is not going to end in your death. You can just come out of there.
Right.
But as far as I know, and I could be wrong, but I don't think any of those experiments worked out. That they just couldn't do it, and even within a friendly environment around that. So you can imagine if you were in an unfriendly environment
like that. Yeah, I think we were talking about ourselves personally, that we would want to have some little entertainment, or for me it would be books probably, and I could picture myself reading certain books over and over again. I like research books and that sort of thing. So I could be happy for a long while with that. I could be happy if I could have a garden. I would like that a lot. But I have to tell you, all of these things that we're talking about assume that you have free time. Time that you don't have to devote to working and things like that. And I think if we really look at history and we look at what it took for those pioneering families to build a life, they didn't have a bunch of downtime. I mean, everything from repairing torn clothing or holes in socks, or preserving food that you were able to forage or grow. I mean, you have to have all of that. I know a lot of them, just something as simple as, drying fish or strips of meat. That takes time. And somebody's got to do that work. And I just can't.
Yeah, but you wouldn't find that in a dome on Mars. I mean,
what is it going to be for you?
The supposition is that you do have a lot of free time. In fact, too much. That's part of the problem you have to overcome, because the systems will all be automatic, and you're just looking at a panel of meters from time to time to make sure everything's okay.
Is food for you going to be some kind of an engineered tablet or disc,
whatever works.
Vitamins that you eat?
Works. Yeah, definitely. But I think that's part of the problem that they have to overcome, is that knowing that there'll be a lot of downtime, actually.
Well, if you're an artistic person, maybe you write your songs, or, paint something if you could, or draw something, or...
Some of the younger ones who have brought it pretty much up on only tech, would probably fare better than people who had that perspective of not having all of the tech around them all the time.
Yeah. It just seems very stark. And like I say, even the space station. Now, I would think that the ongoing experiments that they do on the space station are a reason to get up in the morning. You know, you want to find out, okay, how did this do overnight? I got this set up. I want to see what this looks like or that looks like. And you're constantly challenged by collecting as much data as you possibly can,
keeping experiments,
keeping systems running. I mean, we've seen where they've had to do like spacewalks out there to repair stuff that wasn't working properly.
Yeah.
And there were other systems inside. And recently, we had the 2 astronauts who were stranded on the space station. They were only supposed to be there for a week or so. And they were there for months on end until another ship could come.
Yeah. You also have the problem of the fact that the human body atrophies in low gravity, and the space station especially. But even on Mars, it has some gravity, of course, but it's less, so you wouldn't have the normal exercise you'd have just by walking around on a planet with greater gravity like the Earth. And you have your workout. And they got their exercise routines on space station too, but they found that even though they keep up those protocols well when they're up there, they still lose bone density and that sort of thing. They don't know how to counteract that problem.
No. So that would be something that you would have to consider. So I just, maybe I'm not a visionary. I don't think I am. I think I'm sort of bogged down in practicalities because I know, that experience with our water system was so eye-opening for me. And I remember when I was a kid, we always did canned things. My mom was a big one for that. We had a lot of kids. And so
Tang. Remember Tang?
Yeah.
That was what the astronauts took up there. So everybody was into Tang for a while.
You said your grandpa thought that was about the greatest thing ever.
Yeah, he kept saying, that's what the astronauts use. That doesn't necessarily make it good. But.
Well, and also the freeze-dried ice cream. That was such a big deal. That and space pens. Those were such big selling points. Do you agree with me that it seems like
sometimes
privatizing all of these space agency tasks is a bad idea? Does it feel like we're ceding too much control over things to individuals, to profit-making individuals?
Yeah, it should be probably government, definitely. I believe at least there's a layer of expectation that it's for the greater good in the future, as opposed to just how much money you can make.
Yeah. Now, that's not necessarily a criticism of SpaceX or anything like that. It just seems to me like, as a country, we need as much understanding of how that's all being run and who is at the helm. What are their deep connections? Because that kind of stuff is increasingly important. Now, especially that they're talking about these iron domes and golden domes and putting, I guess lasers out in space in case of a rogue asteroid or something like that. I want to know, I want to...
Well, that's just it. They should be investing in those sort of things as opposed to trying to live on Mars, I would say.
Yeah.
You're putting all that money and effort into having a safer place to live. We have that. It just needs some help from us with not being greedy and not being entirely capitalistic about everything you do.
Is it about mining? Is it about they want to go to these places because they know that they have certain ores and
the
minerals, and they make sure that they stick their corporate flag in the ground there, and then that gives them the right to have first pick or whatever of mining rights on those places. Even on some of the asteroids, I understand that they're saying that there's a lot to be considered with those, but I'm thinking...
Yeah, they're valuable.
Yeah.
Even when they hit what the remains of them reach the Earth, then those are, rare minerals in there as well.
Wow.
So, that's a thing, definitely. And you could do that as an enterprise without having to, have people just kind of move to Mars and that's where you live from now on. It'd be tough to get the mail there, though, wouldn't it?
Yeah. Is that the purpose of this AI thing? Why we're so hot on the AI?
Is Amazon going to send one of their spaceships up there with their delivery? Maybe.
They're not going to. Only if it's a little wee package that you can fit in your pocket. I'm here to tell you that they're not in a big rush to deliver stuff here because we've tried. We wanted to get a lawn chair delivered here and something that would be hard for us to take back on the bus, and they wouldn't deliver it. They wouldn't deliver it, and there's a road right there. It goes up a mountain, but there's a road right there. Trucks pass all the time on that road, big trucks. And Amazon couldn't see their way clear to come here. And the post office said that the folding, I'm talking a camping chair, that was too big for the post office, so we were just out of luck. So I can tell you Amazon won't be delivering to Mars.
Maybe, because they have a plane going up there anyway, so who knows?
Well, yeah, I suppose. But it won't be fun stuff.
You pay the delivery fee, they'll do it.
Plus, all of those billionaires are kind of buddies.
Yeah.
So maybe if it's a buddy thing, they will, but it wouldn't be if it was just me and you, or somebody, in our ilk. So I don't know. But it's a good thought exercise, and it is freaky when you think about it. I mean, really, a lot of the freaky stuff we like to talk about and that's entertaining is much less out there than the concept of how would you survive if you had to leave this earth and set up somewhere else? What would it take? Yesterday we were playing around. I was talking about my kitchen implements that I would need and how I would rely on you to provide some tech to make the downtime a little more interesting.
Yeah. What are your favorite movies that involve survival on another planet? In a cave or something?
Oh, I love Enemy Mine.
Yeah,
it's one of my very favorites. Oh, with one of the Quaids was in that. And I forget the other guy. Was it Lou Gossett?
The best Quaid.
Yeah. Well, yeah, but it's a really good movie. Yeah. Mm-hmm. I love the premise of it. I think it was amazingly well done, and I've watched it a few times, and I make other people watch it when they come to my house. So, but I don't have it with me.
It's also a good one that teaches the whole principle of, what causes division and keeps people divided, even though the premise in this movie, there was a human and an obvious non-human. But the minute that you relate to an individual face to face, then all of that starts to melt away.
And with openness and a willingness to understand their worldview. And I think that's one of the problems right now. I mean, we see all of this big furor over immigrants. We are all human beings. We are all Earthlings.
All Earthlings, yeah.
And it seems kind of late in the game to be so exclusive about our little patch of ground and to have a complete inability to acknowledge contributions by others who aren't of the same culture as ourselves, or to consider ourselves more entitled or supreme or something like that. That will never serve us. I mean, you can go through these exercises, you can spend lots of money doing it, you can commit a lot of manpower to it, but in the end, it's not going to work. It'll never work because we're all Earthlings. And certainly, it would be much better if we could figure out ways that we can all coexist and make this absolute ridiculous amount of resource be enough for all of us, and to figure out a way to keep it restored so that we're not using it all up.
Repurposed. That's one of the things that the mega rich like to do, just build everything new instead of look at ways of repurposing stuff that's already there.
Yeah. Well, you and I usually complain about a lot of these shopping centers that close up. Remember when all the Kmarts closed up?
Well, the malls especially.
Yeah, all these empty malls.
They're just abandoned.
And it seems like I know that those builders, those construction companies have to get building permits. I know they have to. It's like anybody. If you build a garage on your property, you got to go through the town. You got to pay them some money. You got to show them the plans. And they have to sign off on it. And if they're signing off on stuff that's only going to last 20 or 30 years, that's crazy. I mean, that's one of the charms of a place like this when you come over to cultures that are older than ours in the United States. And you see buildings that have been there for absolute centuries. And it makes you feel like we've almost been cheated in the Industrial Revolution years. Because it seems like stuff got slapped up, just kind of put together with an understanding that it wasn't going to last, that it was a planned obsolescence. And that seems like a huge waste.
Oh, it is, yeah. That comes with capitalism also, planned obsolescence.
But can these defunct malls and department stores, why couldn't they be repurposed into some sort of housing?
They could. And I think there's
community?
A project here and there that does do that, but it's not nearly enough because you see too many hulking, empty malls around still.
And plus all of these homeless encampments. That is absolutely a shame. It is absolutely a disgrace that in our cities, everybody can't have a proper shelter. There's no excuse. There's no word that can describe how absolutely shameful that is, that we can't manage that. It's unconscionable. And especially a lot of these people are working. They're working. They just can't make enough to pay those rents. And all of these flippers and that are just jacking prices up on housing that should be reasonable and affordable. And so instead of, committing billions upon billions to ship a bunch of us off to Mars, then maybe we should be spending the billions on those.
I'm guessing it won't
basics.
Be a bunch of people like us or the common population.
No, it ain't going to be me and you.
I'm just guessing.
No, it's not going to be me and you. Well, one of the biggest things that they wouldn't like about taking me and you, and it isn't just our age, cantankerous, Dave. We've got too much to say about too much stuff, and that makes us kind of a bad person to take, because you want somebody that's impressionable, somebody that is less set in their ways and less outspoken than we are. So.
And they don't want to hear about doing things the old-fashioned way, even though that's what you need. You need a measure of that. You need a measure of innovation together with learning how to use what you can find.
And just good old-fashioned problem-solving and hard work. I can't believe, I think if anybody believes that they can go to Mars and that they're not going to be in an honest-to-goodness pioneering situation where you're going to be working. You're not going to be sitting around the holodeck. You're going to be working. And just to build out just the basic stuff, If the space station requires an occasional spacewalk with somebody with a wrench and a screwdriver to keep that functional and to optimize the safety of the people on board, it's just not a stretch. And it's something that should be planned in. You're going to be working, brick by brick. That stuff, you might be able to have a lot of prefab stuff that you're going to slap together, but in an atmosphere that doesn't resist asteroids, we're thinking, your mind wants to think, oh, great big asteroid, we'll see it coming, we'll be able to laser it right out of the way. Mm-hmm. But there'll be a billion little ones that'll be pounding on your stuff all the time. It'll be like having, kids throwing rocks at your car, and that's not good. Or a hailstorm, I know some of the states have had bad hailstorms where the cars are all pockmarked and, windshields broken and things like that. And in an atmosphere like Mars, you're going to be dealing with that.
Yeah. Another thing that's a favorite thing on sci-fi movies is the atmosphere of certain planets or moons or whatever it may be, that when they have an electrical storm, they kind of ignite the gases that are in the atmosphere also. It's not enough to have a healthy electrical storm, but you also have to blow up some of the atmosphere at the same time.
You got to make it as bad as possible to be good at the box office, I think.
So would you say your favorite movie, sci-fi movie, is Enemy Mine then, or do you think of any others?
Yeah, probably that.
2001, I think. It's such a classic.
I like that movie as much as I've seen of it, but Dave, it always puts me to sleep.
I think that's the idea, really.
It's the music or something, and
You're supposed to go into suspended animation to survive those. So they want the audience to really experience that.
Well, they lull me right to sleep all the time. So I don't know.
Oh, you're perfect for space travel then.
Yeah, maybe.
Just put some soothing thing on, and you're in suspended animation until you get there.
Yeah, I don't know. It requires too much trust and faith, and I might have a problem in that area.
Well, don't get me wrong. I mean, I love sci-fi. I always have. I love sciences. I love all of that. And the idea of space exploration, amazing. So maybe I'm coming off sounding like I'm against any of that, but I do think that the planet that you're from, and it's beautiful, and it works, and it's just amazing, that you should take care of at least most of the problems on that planet before you strike out or spend too much money on elsewhere.
Dedicate yourself to it. If you're an innovator, then use that innovation right here at home. And I do believe that AI might be the solution for sending missions to space. But again,
I don't know, that the example of 2001: A Space Odyssey and my name, I think I know what you mean.
Yeah.
I think you know what I mean.
What it is. I can't do that, Dave.
I can't do that, Dave.
Yeah.
There was a friend of ours that used to keep teasing me with that line.
Everything that you asked her.
Yeah, she said,
I can't do that,
I'm sorry,
Dave.
I can't do that, Dave.
And you need to get that real robotic, real even sound. I'm sorry. I can't do that, Dave.
There you go. I know, it's kind of creepy. It's freaky in its own right.
It is. It is. But I do think it's a good exercise for people. Think about it. What would you do if you were all alone? A lot of people are lonely in their everyday existence. And, I mean, we've all felt, even in a crowd, that you don't fit in. You don't feel like you're in sync with all the things that are going on around you. I think there's a lot of people these days who feel like they are absolutely not in sync with a lot of the things that are happening around us.
Interesting perspective situation. And from some of the sci-fi movies, like some astronauts that have been away a long time, and when they realize the perspective of the loneliness and disconnectivity that they feel when they're out there, and when they come back to Earth, even though Earth is big, and there's thousands and thousands of miles between us and other continents and all that, all of a sudden they feel that this is not far away. You feel like you're a huge space that you're living in, you have no connection to anything, but when you come back from the kind of perspective that they had, broad, yeah, it's like you're cozy and everything's close and you don't feel lonely anymore, is what I'm trying to say.
No, it's familiar. I think there's a difference between to feel comfortable and familiar. You are home. It's your home planet. We need to think about it as not just my home and your home, but everybody's home. And the perspectives that we have, particularly religiously, I think we are all talking about one creator. If you are a creationist, there is one creator. But everybody has a different perspective on it. It's like having a different piece of an important puzzle that needs to be put together. It needs all the pieces. And with that, we're out of time. And we'll say, do count your blessings. And just being on your familiar planet Earth is one of them. So do the exercise. Walk yourself through it, because it's interesting to understand your own view of all of that and how would you deal with it. And it's a good exercise, I think. So with that, I'll say goodbye, and we'll talk again next week.